Okay, this is an interview for the Veterans History Project. My name is Ryan Honnell, and first we're going to start with some biographical information. So can you please state your full name?
Karen Nelson Stacy.
Where were you born?
Roseau County in Minnesota.
And who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My parents were Ivor and Lillian Nelson. They lived in the Malone Township area. My dad worked for the county garage or the county maintenance system here in the county, and then my mother was a school teacher.
Okay. And who are your siblings? Do you have any siblings?
I do.
Okay. And who are they?
I have two brothers. One older, Rodney Nelson, and one younger, Stuart Nelson.
Okay. Did any of them serve in the military?
They both did.
They both did. What did they do?
My younger brother was in the Army, and my older brother was in the Navy. He joined ROTC, and my older brother, and then it was at that point they discovered he had a heart murmur, so he really didn't serve any active duty time. But my younger brother was a sergeant in the Army.
Okay. What were your parents and/or siblings' feelings about you joining the service?
I think they were quite surprised. My younger brother, had just gotten out of the military, and he's the one that influenced me. I had been teaching high school and junior high school for about 5 years during the time that Vietnam was finishing. And he's the one that really influenced me, because one of the things, in addition to wanting to serve my country in some way, I wanted to get my master's degree, and on a teacher's salary, that was kind of a bit of a stretch. So he said, well, why don't you look into joining the military? So that's the pathway I took. So he was all for it, and it was very encouraging. My dad was kind of head scratching and said, well, I suppose if you have to do it, it's best to do it now. He didn't quite understand his daughter. My mother was very supportive, and as was my older brother.
Did you hold any jobs before entering the military?
I did.
What did you do?
I was a school teacher, as I said, and taught in the state of Montana for a year and 4 years in Minnesota.
Okay. And what do you remember from talking to a recruiter?
It's 1973, so Vietnam was kind of going down and finishing. And as we look back, we can declare that it was finishing, right? In talking with a recruiter, there were only probably about maybe 20,000, if even that many, women in the Army Corps, Women's Army Corps. So it was something that they were dealing with and trying to figure out. There was a strong recruiting effort to get people, because the draft had been eliminated, so they were trying to maintain strength. So they had turned to, and women, of course, have always served in the services in a support role of some kind, and some of them, in direct combat too. So it was a challenging time, and it was a time of with the recruiters, like I really didn't know how to deal with a female coming into the service. So they did have a female recruiter that came out of I think it was Grand Forks, that came up here, and that was how I chatted. So I looked at all the services. I looked and said, which one is going to offer the best? And the Army had the strongest recruiting, because they offered me a commission as a first lieutenant.
All right, now we're going to transition to your time in service.
Okay.
What year did you go into the service start?
I joined the service in 1973 and served until 1976.
Okay. What got you interested in joining the military?
It was a call to serve. It was, Vietnam was a very tumultuous time for everybody. Even those of us in Roseau County were aware of what was going on. We had many individuals that were called to serve. So it was a tumultuous time, and it was something that I didn't understand. And I'm kind of more of a hands-on, get involved person that said, I need to understand this a little bit more. So that was part of the reason, but the other reason was the GI Bill, that I wanted to get my master's degree for sure and go on for more education.
Where did you initially go for training?
I started out in Fort McClellan, Alabama, in Anniston, Alabama, for WAC, Officer Basic. They took us, we were sent down there because the Women's Army Corps was still in existence, even though the disestablishment and phasing out of the Women's Army Corps was underway. But we were still sent there for, I think it was about 12 weeks of training. And then from there, I was branch transferred, if you will, to Transportation Corps, and went to Fort Eustis, Virginia, for TOBAC, or Transportation Officer Basic.
Okay. Do you recall your first few days of service, and what did it feel like?
Foreign. It was, I was thinking about that. I recall the morning I left Roseau County. It was a day in April. It was pitch dark, black, it was dark, and my parents drove me to the airport in Thief River Falls to get on the plane and go to this place called Anniston, Alabama. And I remember looking out the aircraft down, and they'd had terrible rains in Anniston before arriving. And there was nothing but water, and it was kind of the color of red soil. And I thought, what have I done? So, and then from there, we got on a bus, and the bus driver misread our orders. There were, I don't know, 3 or 4 of us, I guess, and he misread the orders, and he dumped us off, literally dumped us off in the enlisted area for people. Well, it wasn't very long before they came scrambling back, and with great apologies said, it took us over to where the officer basic training was going on.
Wow. What was your first experience with an officer training instructor?
The major at the time, of course, I knew zip about what rank was, but the major at the time that was leading the Women's Army Basic came into our barracks the night that we arrived, and she just strolled around and met people and casually discussed and said, "Where are you from?" And it was a very it was an informative and also inviting. She was very inviting to us to say welcome. It was I think quite different from those that perhaps were in the enlisted. The officers were quite, like I said, welcoming.
Okay. What was your initial officer candidate schooling like?
I think one of the big things that they wanted to make sure coming out of the WAC, I went through 2 basics really, so we had to make sure that we had got it right the first time. With the Women's Army Corps, they were concerned, I think, to make sure that we were at the par that the men were. So we were learning how to march, we were learning how to salute. We did not deal with weapons at that point. But when I went to the Transportation Officer Basic, then we got weapons training.
Okay. How did you get through it? How did you get through the training part?
A lot of support and network with the other women that were there. There were probably somewhere around 30, 35 in our class in going through. So it was grueling, and they put us through some real long paces and learning and things like that. It was very intensive with history and learning about the Women's Army Corps and the what women had contributed to the services over the years. And then when we went through the Transportation Basic, that was a whole different scenario. Because when I went to Officer Basic in Virginia, it was of course a co-ed company. There were 3 women. We were the second group of women that had gone through the TOBAC course. There had been one right before us. And in going through TOBAC, it turned out that the 2 ranking officers were both women. And I was the second ranking officer, so they came to me at that point in time and said, said, "Lieutenant, would you object if we bumped you and the female lead or the officer was one?" And then I said, "Nope, you can have a male in there," so that we had a balance, because of course, obviously, there were probably 35 men and 3 women.
And you went into the transportation corps?
Yes.
Okay, and is that what you served in throughout your service?
Right, after.
Why did you choose that branch, or did they say that's what you're gonna do?
We got to, we sort of got to choose or say, I would like to be in this branch. Of course, we couldn't be in combat arms branches, so that was not, we hadn't arrived at that point yet, but yeah. So they said, which branch would you like? Well, it was sort of a throw it at a dart, so.
Okay. What is your most vivid memory of a time in training?
Oh, there's so many, but I think the most vivid memory that I have was when I was in Officer Basic at Fort Eustis, when we went out to the field. And we did training at what was called AP Hill. And the class leader at the time got sick, so when we went to the field, as the second ranking officer, they said, "You're in charge, Lieutenant Nelson, thank you." And they didn't know what to do with us because we weren't issued, and they finally had to issue us fatigues, because of course, but what they forgot in the issuing of the fatigues was we didn't have t-shirts. We don't wear t-shirts. So the day they announced that everybody was so hot and miserable, everybody could wear t-shirts, we said, excuse us. So they had to scramble and find some t-shirts for us. And the people asked, well, how did the men react when you were giving orders and getting them up and all of that? And I said, well, I sort of took it, I grew up with boys in Roseau County, you have kind of there's a way of dealing with things. And I said, the first morning they wouldn't get out of bed, so I walked into their barracks and turned the lights on and said, get up. From that point on, I never had any problems with them. They were great members of the service. I was very proud to serve with them.
Do you have any particular instructor that really stood out?
No, there wasn't. I don't recall anyone specific, but I think the day that they role played with there was a master sergeant in the group, and he came up and played it was the good bad cop routine that they oftentimes use in training and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, this is really an interesting approach. My educator kicked in.
What type of training or schooling did you have while in the military beyond your initial training?
There was, I was sent to a couple of training down, I think in San Antonio for drug abuse and things like that, because the job that I got when I was assigned when I got to Denver for my first assignment was as an XO of a company. And to do that, and it was a unit of non-tactical, so it was about 300 enlisted. And most of them were the 91 Charlies, or what we call LPNs. So they were concerned about drug abuse and things like that, and the mental state of the troops and that. I was assigned to Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center in Denver, and that was where many of the troops coming back from Vietnam would come. It was a prosthetic hospital, but also that they did a lot of psychology and psychological work with the individuals. So we're trained in that, and then also diversity. That was a big push, because of course here you have women coming into support units and things like that, and it was an adjustment, and it was a mindset change for many people. Many leaders within the organization, many leaders within the Army had to rethink how they were dealing with troops and things like that. And it was baffling for some of them. I had the privilege of being a commander. I moved from the XO position to commanding units. And while at Fitzsimmons, I was given the opportunity to command an all-male company for about 2 or 3 months, while the assigned commander was coming in from Germany, but he was late in getting there. So they put me in charge of this 300 men. Well, the biggest challenge for the first sergeant was finding a bathroom and putting it off limits for the day.
Did you qualify with any special equipment?
Right, the M16. We had
M16?
Yeah, we had that. We were out. That was kind of basically what we were trained to use.
What was that like? What was that training like?
When I think about on the firing range, there was one sergeant that was just so upset. Or at least he just muttered under his breath all day long about women, and how are we going to be doing with this? And it was just one thing after the other. He was very courteous, but it was just, I could tell he was just so troubled about women firing weapons and things like that, and learning how to protect ourselves because in the support unit, even though transportation was the support branch, the enemy doesn't know that we're not supposed to do these types of things. So anyway, it was interesting to be in the field with people that there were men that had never fired weapons either. So I had fired weapons as growing up in the county here.
You said your first station was in Denver.
Yes.
What exact unit did you serve with?
Oh, it was Bravo Company. I don't remember what the nomenclature was, but it was a company of like I said, 91 Charlies, or the people that supported the hospital. There were 2 or 3 other companies on post.
Do you remember the day that you arrived at the unit?
I do.
Tell me about it a little.
I walked into the orderly room and it was kind of dumpy. It was probably World War I barracks, not World War II, I'm not sure. But there was a lot of activity and chaos, and there was some kind of inspection going on, I remember that. So there was, and when I arrived, I actually came in early, so that when I first arrived there, they said, the first greeting was, "Oh, you're here already."
What other units did you serve with, and did you serve anywhere else?
No, I spent my career in Denver, at Fitzsimmons.
And how long were you in the Army?
A little over 3 years.
Okay. What was the hardest part of military lifestyle that you had to adapt to?
I'm not sure that hardest style was, that's a good question. I'm not exactly sure I know how to answer it. I think it was learning to maneuver and learning to work with people that came from various backgrounds. Not that you're not flexible or agile in learning how to adapt and work with people, but there were some strange people in the service, as there is in life.
What was Army food like?
Actually, we had a very, very good cafeteria that was set up in the hospital. Being a hospital unit is a little, or a post. It had probably, but it was kind of what was referred to when I got the assignment. They said, "Oh, you have a country club assignment." So it wasn't very rough.
When you were in training, did you have, I think at that time they were sea rats? Is that
Right.
They still have
when we were
those?
in the field, we had sea rats.
Yeah, what do you think about those? What was
they,
the best?
They were just delicious, right?
Was there anything that was good out of them?
Not that I recall.
What was the worst one that you had? Do you remember?
No, there was some pork stuff that I didn't really much like.
Okay. How did people entertain themselves while you were in the military?
I think pretty much doing what people in the regular, living in Denver. It was I lived off post, so I had sort of a normal life, if you will.
Did you have any experience with entertainment such as the USO or any other organizations?
Yes, Bob Hope came to Fitzsimmons.
You saw Bob Hope?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
When you interview my husband, you will find that he will have many, many more stories.
Okay.
Because he was the general's aide and worked directly with the Hope entourage that came. But they sent tickets. We were down and we got to see the show, and he
Did
was.
you enjoy it?
I did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet him by chance?
I didn't. But
Oh. That's a legend.
it is.
Yeah.
Do you ever recall playing any pranks on anybody, whether training or at your unit?
Oh, I think we all did. One night we got up and we covered all the toilet seats with saran wrap, so, that type of thing during basic.
How did that go?
Oh, it was smashingly successful.
Did you ever learn anything about a fellow service member that surprised you?
I went through basic with some really, really talented and gifted women and men in Tobac in Virginia, both places. I think that the surprise of going through was meeting people that came from other parts of the country was so exciting to me that it was. I looked at each individual that I met as a unique person and saying how gifted I was, or being able to, being given the gift of serving with these people that had so much talent.
Were you able to keep in contact with any of them?
I did for some years afterwards. I maintained contact with a couple that one of them made a career out of the Army, went on to be a colonel and served, and another one ended up in the Washington area, so we kept in contact. But these later years, one day I have to go back to the Women's Memorial again and check out where these people are, where my colleagues are.
You said you saw Vietnam folks come back.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any particular stories you can share about that? Any, folks that came back really injured?
I think
if you want to share it.
It was hard, being in the medical unit and seeing people that were damaged not only physically but mentally more than anything. We didn't know we knew that there was something different, but PTSD was not as understood as it is today. And
Was there still like a stigma around it at that time?
Oh, very definitely. Yes.
Did anybody get medically discharged over any psychiatric issues at that time?
Yeah.
They did?
Yeah.
What was your rank when you left the service?
I was captain. I have to share with you, 1975 was a pretty big year in my life.
Okay, tell me about it.
In 1975, of course, that was the end of Vietnam. It was also the year that when Saigon fell, that they conducted Operation Vietnam Baby Lift, where somewhere around 3,000 babies were given to, servicemen or whatever. If you go back and take a look at pictures, you see that mothers are handing off their children they were supposed to come from orphanages, but they were giving their children to people as the helicopters left in that. So about 3,000 were relocated back here to the States. And being in Denver at the hospital unit there, we started to receive some of these children that were coming in, predominantly from Tripler out of Hawaii and out of San Francisco as they were moved along. And the way that they did it was we would get a call maybe any time of day, 24 hours a day, anytime we could, and we would go out to the airport. They would cordon off, the flight was coming in. This is a passenger flight, a normal flight, coming in from probably San Francisco. And the passengers would be holding the babies or with the children. And as they got off, they would give us the babies, and then we worked with the Red Cross, and then we would help transport them to the station where they would be further checked out for diseases or whatever. So that was a pretty big event that was going on because we were supporting the whole scenario. 1975 was also the year that I got promoted to captain, and it was also the year I got married. So there you go.
Okay. Did you receive any? Oh, okay. You obviously received promotions. Could you tell me about it when you went from lieutenant to captain? What did that feel like?
That was a fun time because while I was stationed there in Denver, there were several of us on post that were promoted from lieutenant to captain. So I happened to decide that I was going to take a course in Polynesian culture in Hawaii. So I went off for a couple of weeks for some educational purposes, nothing related to the military. It was just It was a boondoggle. But we weren't married at the time, but the gentleman, the guy that I was dating, who was now my husband, he and 3 or 4 others held a promotion party at the officers club, and sadly I missed it. And of course, forever and a day, he reminds me, number 1, you missed the party, and number 2, I outrank you by 32 days.
How long were you in then before you got promoted to captain? That seems pretty quick.
2 years.
2 years you made captain.
Yes.
Wow. What medals or citations, if any, did you earn?
Of course, everybody got the Good Conduct Medal, right? And the Meritorious Service Medal.
Okay. Do you recall the day that your service ended?
I do.
Tell me about that.
It was a sad day for me in many ways. It was a fulfilling day, but also a day that I knew would change my life. And as I look back, I am so grateful for the opportunity to have been given the privilege to serve, because it led me on pathways that I normally never ever would have gone. And when I left the service, I have to share with you a story that I came on post, and by that time I was married. Came on post to see my husband, who was doing something with the general or whatever, and I went to pick him up, and I was in civilian clothes, of course, because I was no longer in the military. And the little MP at the gate stopped me and scolded me because I hadn't saluted him. I said, "Not today."
What do you especially miss about your service?
There's a camaraderie that occurs when you are in the service with no matter what branch, but predominantly in the Army, I found it very, very, very secure. If I had problems, that I had people that I could turn to and say I need help or whatever. And you find that in the civilian world, if you will, but there's something about when you are in the military and you served in the military that there's an immediate connection that says, I understand.
Did you return home afterwards, or where did you go?
No, we stayed in Denver for a little bit, and then my husband remained in the service for a period of time, so we traveled and eventually ended up in the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay. How were you received by your family and community after you got out?
I guess when I look back, I was really one of the lucky ones that they, coming out of the Vietnam era was not a pleasant time for service people, but also for the country. And I was never, people wondered about, why did you serve? Why did you go in the Army? There's always been that question. That question is even today. People say, "Oh, I didn't know that you were in the military. Why did you join?" And there's still a kind of a puzzling look as they contemplate, "Wow, that's not normal."
Right, because most people at that time were drafted.
Right.
Right. Did you get the GI Bill? I'm trying to think, did officers at that time get the GI Bill?
Yes, I did, and I got my master's degree and went on for doctoral studies.
Okay, and what were those studies in?
They were in educational administration, human resources, personnel management, development.
And where did you work after you got out?
Well,
what was your career like after you got out?
I got my, every job that I think I had from that point on, I can tie to some kind of relationship from the military, because as I interviewed and people saw that I had served, there was a acceptance that was given. So I worked for defense contractors mostly because I had clearances, and working for them have held the highest clearances.
Okay. Did you join any veterans organizations after you got out?
I did. I've been a member of the American Legion at Post 24 in Roseau, Minnesota for over 35 years, I think.
Wow. Do you ever attend any reunions from when you were in the military?
Not yet. I'm not sure if they have them or.
Okay. How did the service change you?
It gave me a perspective of why it's important to serve, why it's important to give of yourself, to understand and recognize that people are very different, that there's a diversity that makes us all special, and that diversity needs to be applauded more than anything.
Now we're going to move into some reflections of your time in service. What was the best part of your service experience?
Oddly enough, I had the opportunity to travel, the opportunity to be in charge of something. You know, commanding companies was challenging, and learning how to work with people and work with individuals. It was just a plain exciting time because I knew that there were things that were being done and that I was given the opportunity to do that were first time events. You know, I worked on, that's how my husband and I met. We worked on a project that moved and transitioned to co-ed barracks at Vet Simmons. So how do we do that, and what working through that? So these are, and being given these opportunities was fabulous. I mean, where else would you ever get the experiences that you're given in the military? I just don't know.
Are there any habits that you picked up in the military that you still carry with you today?
I think that I give a nod of of saying thank you and being grateful, and I think that's a habit that I don't have any way that, you know, I eat differently or I shoot differently or whatever. It's just saying thank you to the service.
Okay. And how has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Vietnam, I think, was a time, like I said, it was a time of great turmoil for us as individuals and also as a country. And I think it gave us pause to say, let's think about what we do as we move into conflicts, as we move into wars and things like that. I'm not sure the lessons are ever learned, or we learn them very well, because we seem to keep repeating things. But there are other casts of characters and players in the world that don't follow and abide by our Western values and cultures. So it's a very challenging time that we live in.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view and hear this interview?
Take the time to serve your country, whether it be in the service, the military, whatever, but take time to serve in some way, to give back to the community. It's so important, I think, that we learn civility. I think that's one thing that the service taught me, was civility is very important. And that's something I think that we as a country and a culture are starting to lose, is that we seem to think that we have the right to say and do anything that we want. And until you really move into a capacity of service, whether it be, you know, like I said, the service or Peace Corps or something like that, a greater whole, and in giving back to and saying you're important to me, and I will defend your right to do this, whatever you choose, but I don't have to agree with you.
You said that you got married while you were in service?
Yes.
That was to another service member?
Yes.
Do you have any advice for military couples that are in today?
Try to get in the same branch. That was what caused us to, you know, one of us had to, because of the time and things like that. My husband was Medical Service Corps and I was Transportation Corps. And I got a call from branch that said, we would like you to come back to Fort Eustis and teach at the school there. And it was at that point we realized, because my husband also had orders to go to his branch. So we would be going separate directions, and we said, not gonna work. So my advice is try to be in the same branch.
Okay. Do you have any children?
Yes, we have one, we have a daughter.
Did she serve in the
No.
military?
No,
Okay, now we're gonna move into the conclusion. What would you like people to know or remember from your story today?
that when you take a risk and step out into an unknown, it can be scary, but it can also be exciting, and it will take you on an adventure that, in looking back, I wouldn't have traded for the world.
What do you wish more people knew about veterans?
How much they care, how much they truly care about what they do and what it means to serve, that they truly are the winners in the world.
Okay. Is there anything you've always wanted to share about your service that you've never shared before?
I think I've shared a lot today.
Okay. Is there anything, last question, is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. Maybe maybe my husband will think of something and build it into his.
Okay. Well, thank you for your service to the nation.
Thank you.
And this concludes the interview.